Welcome to Essential Ingredients. I'm Justine Reichman, founder of Next Gen Purpose, where we explore what it looks like to build a business that are good for the people, good for the planet, and good for the bottom line. I'm recording today on location at Ramsgate Winery in Carneros, one of the most beautifully farmed, rigorously certified estates in California. And I have two extraordinary guests with me. Allison Jordan at the Wine Institute, the organization that represents California's wine industry and has become one of the most important forces for sustainability and innovation, and Jeff O'Neill. He's the founder and sole steward of Ramsgate, 40 plus years in wine, and doing the most meaningful work of his career right now, right here. Today, I want to explore what it looks like when an industry takes stewardship seriously, who's leading that charge, what it actually demands, and why Ramsgate is one of the clearest examples of what's possible when a winery goes all the way in. Welcome to the Essential Ingredients podcast. Allison, it's so great to connect with you and meet you in person.
It's so great to be with you, Justine.
You know, I always love getting off the screen and in real life, so glad to be here with you. So Allison, most people who love California wine have never heard of the Wine Institute. So I'm curious, can you tell us more?
Sure. We are a public policy organization that is really all about the responsible production, consumption, and enjoyment of wine. And so we have representation all over the U.S. and internationally, and really are the voice of California wine.
And so tell us a little bit about what you do there specifically and what your role is.
Sure. So I'm the Vice President of Environmental Affairs for Wine Institute. And so I interact with a lot of different colleagues and on a lot of different environmental and sustainability related issues. And then part of my job is also serving as the Executive Director of the California Sustainable Wine Growing Alliance, which is a partnership between Wine Institute, the winery representative, and the California Association of Wine Growers, who represents the growers of the state. And we're all about promoting sustainable wine growing. And we do that through education, certification, and partnerships.
So I know that the Wine Institute has made sustainability and innovation a real priority. And I know, as you just said, that you've really made a lot of partnerships to recognize these wineries. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of these partnerships and how you're championing them?
Sure. So this really goes back to the creation of something we called the California Code of Sustainable Wine Growing that was first published in 2001. And we had 50 growers and vintners that came together, really building on work that had already been happening in the state, and with the Lodi Viticulture workbook, and in the Central Coast with the positive point system. And there were conversations happening in Napa and Sonoma. So there was a lot of activity already around sustainable wine growing. And the code really brought together this set of 200 plus best practices for both vineyard and winery operations. And it's a way of thinking about, self-assessing your own operations on things like soil management, how you establish the vineyard, every input decision you make in both the vineyard and the winery. It's about water and energy efficiency and air and water quality. So there are all these different elements that go into what sustainability means. And very importantly, a lot of times people think about the environmental side of sustainability, but it's also about the social pieces. So it's about how you treat your employees, worker health and safety, and also how you exist within the community. So we have beautiful wine regions all over the state, and we need to be thinking about what kind of impact we have on our neighbors, but also on the impact our communities have on our businesses and how we can have those positive relationships. And so we need partners from government agencies, nonprofit organizations, really experts in all of these different issue areas. And they helped us develop the code. And then that turned into certification. And we also offer lots of different educational tools and resources. And we really need that expertise to help bring to the industry.
I think education is key for so many reasons, because I think a lot of times people read the headlines.
Yeah.
And they get just a little bit of the information, but they really don't understand the depths of it. And so without the curiosity and the information and the education, a lot of times people, they don't make informed choices. So I think the education is a responsibility that we collectively have, both to get and gain.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think generally people want to do the right thing. And I also think, really, if you look at sustainable practices, they go back to sort of the roots of agriculture. Yeah. And And there's always new science and new best practices and new technology that can be employed. And so there's so much to learn, and it's such a comprehensive set of issues. The more tools and educational resources we can bring, and that peer-to-peer learning, we're here at Ramsgate, and one of the things that I know Jeff O'Neill really believes in is bringing people to learn about agroforestry and the vineyard and some of the healthy soil practices and regenerative practices that they use. And you can go around the state and find amazing examples of people that are really willing to share what they're doing, and others learn and go back and use those practices on their own properties.
So I want to dig into that a little bit more. What specifically brought you to Ramsgate?
I have the great fortune of working for the California wine industry, and there are over 4,000 wineries. Many are doing incredible things. But I first met Jeff way back at the very beginning when I first started in the industry more than 2 decades ago. And it really is because of his leadership and sustainability, someone who really believed in it and got behind it. And as we created our educational program and then certification, just someone who's always been really involved. I also happen to have the benefit of living nearby. So this is one of those places where I feel is a really special place that I bring my friends and family when they come to visit. Getting out and seeing what people are doing in the vineyard and at wineries is really a great way for anyone to learn about sustainable wine growing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you bringing Jeff into the fold so that we could learn more from him about Ramsgate and about his initiatives and innovations in this space and what he's trying to create, not just here, but expansively and around the regions. Jeff, thanks so much for joining me here today.
Well, I'm delighted to be here with you.
It's such a beautiful place you have here. I think it's beautiful. So you've been in this industry for 40 years.
Yes, indeed, I have.
You have an intention of building a sustainable and organic and regenerative area to build wine, to have wine flourish, not just here, but around. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So after being in the business for 40 years, we always think about what's the next frontier. How do we engage? How do we be great stewards of the land? And, 40 years ago, people not only didn't talk about sustainability, they didn't talk about regenerative farming or organic, really at all. And so over the course of the last 40 years, we've evolved. And I actually believe that one of the great ways to communicate with the consumer today is to show them why wine is so important. It's important to agricultural, it's important to farmers, it's really important to the land, and it's, in my view, it's also important to the world, right? We can argue about why the climate's changing, but I think we know that carbon has something to do with it. And to the extent that we can make our small contribution to sequestering carbon and treating people properly, it's just super important.
Very important. So I'm going to dig into that in a minute. Because I have a couple questions to go riff off of that. But before we do that, I'm curious, why is this so important to you personally?
Well, look, I think, we're all put on this earth occasionally, and if you get an opportunity to, improve people's lives and essentially the environment, I think we have an obligation to do that.
I couldn't agree more. I feel like I'm driven every day because of my purpose. Like that gets me up every morning.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And of course, this all started years and years ago with, initially, it was solar, and then it was how we manage water and how we clean water. We have the largest worm farm of any winery in the world, which purifies our wastewater. So and then that water goes back out into the vineyards, and then the vineyards flourish, and then the worm castings actually ultimately go back in the vineyard as well as compost. So we're trying to create this environment between solar and waste and what have you that all works together.
I think that more people are going to be inspired when they hear this, because I think that that's what we're all trying to achieve and change and learn more about. So let's give them an opportunity to learn why this is so important, how they can do this. And let's just talk a little bit. Okay, so Ramsgate holds Certified Sustainability CCOF Organic and Regenerative Organic Certified, one of the most demanding certifications in agriculture. Can you walk me through what it actually takes to get that?
Sure. It actually takes years to get there, but I think people think it's just a method and you get there. I think from our perspective, everybody on your team has to embrace it. right? You just can't do it. So in this case, we happen to be at Ramsgate today, but our winery, Robert Hall, is also Regenerative Organic Certified. And there's only 35 of them in the world today. But it is a mission, right? It is, getting pesticides out of the vineyard, getting all the herbicides out of the vineyard. It's making sure when we send a worker home, they're not going home and hugging their child, with glyphosate or any other pesticide or herbicide. So it really is a mission, but it starts with the dirt, really, but it has to flow all the way through the winery into the bottle.
That's a lot.
It is a lot, and it is an investment. But we also think one of our goals at O'Neill Vineyards and Distillers and all of our properties is to show the world that it can be done at scale and done economically, so the consumer is the beneficiary.
Yeah, I think the planet's the beneficiary, the consumer's the beneficiary. I think it's a better way to do things. What do you think some of the greatest challenges that people perceive are?
Well, I think change is always difficult, right? Farmers have gotten used to, if they need fertilizer, they call up a tanker truck and the nitrogen shows up in a tanker in the back, and then you've got to plow up the field, and then you've got to inject the nitrogen. We're trying, which incidentally, most of the nitrogen comes through the Strait of Hormuz, just in case anybody's wondering. It's not just oil that comes out of there, it's nitrogen as well. Our goal is to teach everybody that, and it does take 3 to 5 years to get the soil converted. But once it's converted, you can actually hear today all the birds and the life that takes place here. Whether it's small animals or birds or bugs or bees, this creates this amazing environment where there's good bugs and bad bugs, and if you create the environment, the good bugs will eat the bad bugs. So getting rid of herbicides is super important to us.
Yeah, I agree. And there's so much. I want to talk to you about the birds after and the other ones that I've met before here. But so I just want to say, in 2025, you launched the Agroforestry initiative, planting fruit trees within the vineyard rows. Most people farming for the quarter don't do that. What does that vineyard look like in 20 years if it works?
Well, I think, look, what we're all trying to get away from is really a monoculture, right? Mm-hmm. Typically, you plow up the field, you mow, you plow, and then you inject nitrogen or whatever fertilizers you want to use into the ground, and we're trying to flip that on its head, and then so that's Regenerative Organic Certified, and then we're taking this small vineyard. It's actually the one right behind me. Where we've planted several hundred fruit trees. Everything from apples, apricots, peaches, plums, to create an environment that will attract more birds, more bugs, and have an ecosystem that actually is truly, truly sustainable. So it's a bit of an experiment. We are not the first. Cheval Blanc, I believe, was the first to do it in France, and I will say, some of my team wasn't too excited about trying it, but I think we have to continue to experiment wherever we can. But if we can bring more birds, more wildlife, and a better ecosystem for the vineyard, we ought to be doing that.
Yeah, and so the biggest objection or one of the objections that I would imagine you hear is cost?
Yeah, I think, here we are, we're in Sonoma County, so, theoretically we should be able to spend a little bit more on the vineyards. But, our goal ultimately is to show that we can make commercial wines, whether they're $10 or $15 or $20, they're totally accessible and they can be done regeneratively, organically, and at the same time, obviously, we're sequestering carbon in the vineyards. And
so they're better for us and they're better for the planet. Let's talk about taste.
Yeah, no, it's super great question, and clearly a challenge. As you convert these vineyards, obviously winemakers are constantly worried about, is it, mildew, bugs, aphids, whatever, and it is a challenge, and you have to take the initiative to try it, but we firmly believe that once the vineyards are established and they are regenerative, they are super balanced. We're sequestering water as well, not only carbon, but the moisture that stays in our soils is significantly improved. And we know California is short on water. So all of this helps, right? It helps with carbon sequestering. It helps with water usage. And then most importantly, at the end of the day, you ask about taste. Once the vineyards are in balance, we are super confident. We have bottled wines for the last 2 years at our Robert Hall property, which are certified regenerative organic, and they taste delicious. And I'm our biggest critic, right, of our own wines, right? I think you have to be critical of your own and say, is this real, or is this, that doesn't taste great, but it was the right thing to do. Well, it has to be the right thing to do, but it also has to taste great. The consumer has to open it and say, wow, this is super delicious.
Yeah, because otherwise it's not gonna be effective. It doesn't matter how wonderful it is if it doesn't taste good.
That is absolutely correct. And I think consumers today, they're pretty finicky and picky about their wines. And the reality today, though, is the wines that are grown in California and throughout the world, the quality standard is super high.
I think so, because I think consumers are, like you said, picky. So let's talk a little bit about the consumer evolution, right? Because things have changed, in the last few years, in the last decade. I'd love to hear your perspective on this and what it looks like today.
Yeah, I think if you think about things organic and what have you, I mean, obviously you have the Whole Foods consumer, which has evolved over the years, and of course there's organic sections in every market today. But I think one of the big changes is the consumer of today wants to know what is in the products that I'm buying. And I think historically, my generation and earlier generations maybe didn't pay that much attention to what was in the product. And today we have tried to be a leader in obviously sustainability and organics, but also in truth in labeling. So we're trying to put ingredient labeling on most of our wines today. We haven't done it on every one, but we do it on more wines than I think any winery in the world today.
And I think that's what people are demanding now, right? They want to see transparency. They want to know what's on the labels. They want to know what they're drinking, taking in. It makes a difference.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I think we're going to see that consumer today want to know more and more information. So we've tried to identify that on our packaging and then give access to exactly how our wines are made, whether it's through a QR code or some other media. But we think that's super important.
So I understand you've been in this business for 40 years. You've been leading the initiatives on so many of these things to make great change. Can you talk to me a little, maybe share one or two of them with me?
Well, I think, one of the initial ones, from our perspective, we're a fairly large winery. I mean, Ramsgate is a very, very tiny boutique winery, but in general, we're a large winery. And one of the challenges early on was just getting growers to think about sustainability. So back in, it was probably almost 20 years ago now, we talked to growers and we said, we want you to be certified sustainable, which is it's not all the way to organic, but it is a substantial record keeping about pesticides and herbicides and what you're doing in the vineyard and how you're doing that and how you're being great stewards of the land. And we came to our growers and said, we want you to be certified sustainable. We'll give you 2 years to do it. And of course, a lot of the growers said, we can't afford to do that. And I said, you can't afford not to do that, and we will help you. So we had our teams in the field helping them become certified sustainable. So 100% of every vineyard we buy from today is certified sustainable. And the next movement will be, how do we go from certified sustainable to certified sustainable regenerative? And then ultimately, if we can push to organic, we will. But to be perfectly honest, organic can't be done everywhere. It is easier in California, I will say. It is impossible in places like Champagne. But it is possible almost everywhere here.
Wow. Well, that really puts the pressure on a little bit here.
Yeah, I think, even I had members of my team that were very, very skeptical of this whole regenerative sequestering carbon, using sheep to do our mowing and some of our fertilizing. And basically everybody on our team now has said, wow, that it does work. The vines are healthier. We do see a dip in production while it's going under conversion, but once it's completed with healthier soil, we get great yields as well.
So, and I know that you've helped a lot of other people do this. Can you just talk to me about what that means for the industry and how many more people have now been able to build this out with your assistance?
Well, we've had some great team members really kind of energizing the movement, and we didn't want to do this and then say, okay, we're doing this, we're better, you're not doing this. What we really wanted to do was show everybody that you can do it. So we have made all of our data accessible. We do meetings at our wineries in Paso where we can bring in any guest. They can have access to every bit of information we have on all of our regenerative experiments over the past 6 years now. And the vineyard we have now, I believe, is the largest regenerative organic certified vineyard probably in California. It's about 140 acres. But we invite any vintner, any winemaker, anybody to come and learn, and we will show the accomplishments, and then we'll share how they can go do it.
And so in your opinion, if we wanted to share with somebody the two things, the biggest impacts that they can have by incorporating this into the way that they run their vineyard, what would you say they might be?
Well, I think probably, there's a couple things. From my perspective, probably one of the most important things is sequestering carbon. Constantly, if you just take a vineyard, for example, and historically you just went through, you plowed it up, you plowed under whatever vegetation was there, but you're releasing massive amounts of carbon into the atmosphere. So I would say, first and foremost, that's probably number one. And I would say second, but not in that order, is our employees are out in these vineyards. They're working, and do we want them working where there's herbicides and pesticides in the air? And I just think we want to show that not only can we take care of the folks that are actually farming and driving tractors, but we can also guarantee to that consumer that there's no pesticides or herbicides transitioning through the product.
Yeah, I think that I like the new narrative. I like the way that we're taking care of people now. It's not always just trying to cut corners, but we're not just taking care of the product or the service that we're providing, but our whole teams.
Yeah, no, I think that's super important. And that's why it's really kind of a holistic solution, right? It's not just about, claiming that we sequester carbon or, we're not using herbicides or we're better than the next guy. It's really about, is there a kind of a global solution for growing grapes that will be important to the consumer? And as you look at it, it takes care of a lot of things, right? It takes care of the environment, it takes care of people. And then, of course, most importantly, probably, it still has to be economical. So what we've tried to prove is that it doesn't cost much more to do it. And we think over the long term, it probably actually potentially saves money. We haven't quite proved that yet, but I think we can.
Keep me posted on that one.
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear that one. So if regenerative agriculture became the norm, not just for wine and not just an exception, right? So not just the exception, but across food and farming, what does it actually do for the planet? And personally, what do you want California wine to look like in 50 years?
Well, look, I think regenerative farming clearly, at its base, it's sequestering carbon. So that I think, you take California's 350,000 acres and you can sequester carbon there, you are making a significant impact. I think if we could fast forward 50 years, we would say that consumer is going to thank us for taking the initiative and taking the risk to show California vintners that it is possible to be regenerative. And by the way, regenerative doesn't always mean organic. Regenerative is really the principles of taking care of people, but more importantly, sequestering carbon in the vineyard. And just being certified regenerative is not nearly as difficult as going to the organic step. But if we can accomplish the regenerative piece, we think that's just super important. It's super important for the soil, and it's super important for our environment.
Awesome. Jeff, thank you so much for having me here today and for sharing your story. And I hope that together we can share this information and get people to be more informed and make more informed choices.
Great. Well, thank you. I've been delighted to be here today and share our story.
Yeah. If you've been listening to Essential Ingredients for a while, you already know this. The conversations that change you are the ones where someone finally names what you've been feeling but could not say out loud. Here is one. You're more capable than you have ever been, and somehow more invisible than ever. You keep handing out advice you do not take yourself. You keep saying after this next thing to your own life. And the people around you have no idea, because from the outside, everything looks fine. That is exactly what the Primes was built for. The Primes is the only membership community where high-achieving women in midlife stop putting themselves last and start building alongside the people who are already doing the work. Not a wellness program, not a Facebook group. A carefully curated room where your level of experience is the entry point, not the exception. 318 episodes and 1.5 million downloads of this podcast came from the same community the Primes is built on. If this show has been an essential ingredient in your life, this community was made for you. Founding member enrollment closes September 21st, 2026. Find the link in the show notes or go to nextgenpurpose.com/the-prime. I'm glad we could coordinate.
It was so great.
Good.